Hello, welcome again to Sport Unlocked, going through the week's sports news with me, Rob Harris, Martyn Ziegler from The Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, and this week, a special guest, the head of the Norwegian FA, Lise Klaveness. Lisa, welcome to Sport Unlocked.
Thank you so much. So nice to be here.
Busy time for you at the moment as you're running for election for the UEFA Executive Committee.
I haven't really got the full perspective of the workload I've added on because the workload was, as for all, that was big from the start of it. But we're very motivated to try and to learn.
Lisa, why do you want to be on the UEFA Executive Committee? Do you have an idea of what it actually does? Because I think a lot of our listeners see these people arrive in expensive cars, head into nice hotels, have meetings, get a load of money, and leave. So what's your motivation to do it?
Yeah, well, the opposite of what you just said. To me, it's a board. I'm a president in Norway, and it's a board leader. I'm chairing the board of the Norwegian Federation, and we have real discussions in our board. Where we actually decide together the Norwegian Football Federation's decisions. And my motivation to go into the exco is definitely to be part of decisions, to be contributor to decisions, to be prepared, for the game, to protect the game. It sounds like a cliche, but it's not. I'm from the technical department, so to me it's very operational. I come from the players' perspective, the game's perspective. I know how the stakeholders are in the sport with the coaches and all the interests clashing. So and also of course for the future, going into a very geopolitical, stressful time with the deglobalization and a lot of pressure, I find it very important to have bridge builders and people that can lean into difficult discussions. And the last thing is to be a really fighter and a protector of the football for all. uh, Small countries contributing in the big world, and the football for all, also for girls and boys. And I find that a core value of the football. So I don't know if that's the dynamics of the board, but I think it's very important that we take responsibility. We that are on post now take responsibility to to call upon that. I find Sheffer in the how I look in from a bit outside. I don't know him that well. That he has been strong and operational in very important cases, and that the UEFA can be a place where it's not just expensive cars, and it should not be expensive cars at all. It should be a place where decisions are made upon well prepared and by well prepared and knowledgeable people.
And we saw you gain huge prominence last year when you spoke up at the FIFA Congress in Doha about human rights and issues within Qatar. Of course, played more than 70 times for Norway as well, so you've got that experience on the pitch and now off it as well. And also, you'd be one of the very few female representatives on a confederation governing body as well.
Yeah. So it's I come from the sport. I was very passionate player. Had the ball to my bed literally, for 5 years, to funerals and to in Norway we have confirmations where we celebrate that we're adults or whatever. And I had the ball with me with my Norwegian, bunad. It's a costume. So I was weird with that. It was a passion, but it's a symbol also how I do my work now, that the game is, when we talk about Qatar, human rights, whatever, it's very important that we come from the game and out. We should not ever be used from political agendas and in.
One of the big stories of the week, we had the IOC meeting for their executive board, and it looks like they are open now to Russian athletes competing at the Paris Olympics. There had been calls, particularly from Ukraine, to exclude Russians completely, but they are open to Russians competing as neutrals if they have not been associated with the war. This is really one of the most complex areas, isn't it, for football to deal with? This week, UEFA telling the Russians effectively their teams have to stay excluded from competitions. How do you see it? should the Russians be at the Olympics?
As a case, it's of course very, very difficult, because sport should, really, really be a place where you unite people, and not cliche wise, not because of money, not because Putin is friend with this and that. We should be proud to say that we invite everyone to our fields, and that should not be a political statement. That should be, when we go now into a geopolitical era where it's deglobalization, and the football should answer, but USA should still play against China, Iran should still play against whatever. But this case is very difficult now, I find. If we could trust the motives of IOC and the relations, it would be easier. But we can't. I have no foundation to point at anyone, but I do not, at least. So to me, I have the feeling that it's more to it. It's agendas, that neutrality can still be card carrying the set support, and the timing now is horrible. So we're not there, I think, and from a philosophical point of view, it's not right or wrong anything, but we are solidaric with Ukraine now, and to now take them in, I'm very afraid will be used as a brutal way, in a propaganda way, by Kremlin.
Just to follow up on what Lisa was saying, we've talked about the dynamics of the IOC from the start of the war, which sadly is about to hit a year mark soon. Things have only got worse since the invasion. If you look at the kind of rhetoric, the what's happening on the ground, nothing really has changed for the better in a year. Yet the IOC seems to have softened its tone towards Russia vis-a-vis the Olympics. And guys, if listeners are listening, you only have to go back to what we said would happen. This is exactly what was going to happen. The IOC was talking tough because at the time there was no real IOC competitions to worry about. So it's easy to ban somebody from nothing. And now here we are, the start of the potential qualification competitions, and we have the language rolling back, as we have seen with the IOC and Russia since the doping scandal and the various tremors from that. And here we are again, guys. Martyn, Rob, exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, there's no surprises for us. That's for sure. That we kind of expected this to happen once the qualifying competitions for Paris started. The interesting thing, I think, is how other countries react. So actually, Gerhard Heiberg, who's former IOC member from Norway, he spoke to one of my colleagues on the Times last month and said, there's a real chance that Ukraine and its neighbours could actually boycott Paris. Certainly, Ukraine's made that clear this week, that if Russian athletes are allowed to compete as neutrals, Ukraine would boycott. So that would be a really tricky thing for the IOC to deal with, I think. But it looks like there's no stopping them now. They said that governments aren't going to dictate who competes in the games, and everything they've said is pointing to Russians being there in Paris. And we've seen at the Australian Open tennis how supporters can harness Russian athletes and players being there, wearing Z T-shirts, waving Russian flags. We even had Djokovic's father did a video with a pro-Russian YouTuber. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one.
Lisa, is this one of these concerns you flagged up there, issues within the IOC, the close relations that we've seen over so many years with Thomas Bach with Putin, with Gianni Infantino with Putin, and now we're seeing actually that indulging of Russia had consequence in elevating their status, making them sort of seem untouchable, maybe, even in the sense you didn't get significant bans for the doping scandals, then obviously far graver matter in terms of fully invading a neighbour. And at the heart of it, you had Thomas Bach and Gianni Infantino enjoying that close association with Putin even after the annexation of Crimea.
Yeah, I find this, from a value point and a basic humanity point and a motivation point, I really, really believe that football should be a place, where you play when it's war. When I think about, Israeli youth, Russian youth, I see kids, I see 15-year-olds playing football, and this should never be, cliches that politicians in football say, and we should be believed in that. That's our biggest task, to include Muslims, Christian, gay. To me, it's really important. I'm a bit sad that I do support the exclusion of the Russian athletes now. I do support that it should continue for a bit longer. But I'm very sad that it's not, because it's a very based with the trust I have for the organizations myself, and not this and this person, but the structure that we have mixed authority leaders, dictators with our own leaders too much, so that you can never really trust that the agenda is to include not Gazprom or what, but the youth. So we have to build up our own trust so that we in the future, because this is going to be more and more in the future, like more and more deglobalization, and we should not be like populists saying that we're so strong, we do not play against China, we do not play against South Africa. Yes, we should play against all these teams, but for the right reasons. We have to be large, humanitarian, of course not naive. So I find this case very, very important. But now I find that we are a bit tied to our hands. We to take them in again now will be used and perceived in a way that will not serve the sport as I see it now.
Just a loophole as well that should be mentioned. Well, some European nations, or there's a risk that there'll be a boycott as far as the IOC are concerned in the qualification. There might be some salvation for Russia because the Olympic Council of Asia has said it would allow Russian athletes to compete in its events, including perhaps the Asian Games, which are about to start or will start in China, which is a qualification route as well. So, as you say, Lisa, it's a sport's not supposed to be politics, but in reality, a lot of these nations completely use sport as the crucible for these political issues, or to show a particular posture. Lisa, can I ask you a small anecdote? Because you were there, and I was really interested in this. We met in Doha actually on that day, but you were relatively guarded because the talks were still going on. You were up there on the second floor of that pirate ship style hotel there in Lusail with FIFA's executive. Um, on the Sunday, I believe, just before the nations that wanted to wear the armband, the One Love armband, were about to kick off, and I heard it completely collapsed. Can you tell me what happened on that Sunday with FIFA? Fatma Samura, the general secretary, was there. Other FIFA officials. What happened?
Yeah, it was a special experience. It was, on game day or the day before game day. Normally, we don't have a team there, so we try to be a bit, humble to the fact that we are not in this dilemma with our team. But the other FAs were there with the general secretaries and presidents on game day and before game, and which is not normal, as you know. It's not procedure. You would go to different camps, and so it was a very extraordinary situation, and fronts collided, and it was hard, or I would say FIFA put hard against, I guess, soft in the end, then, but so it was. At some point fronts do collide, and that can, for media, that can be, the whole story, not you guys, but for some, because you do really thorough work, but for some media that can just be the full story. But those were just fronts colliding, and I try not to put so much into it, because we have to see the full picture. But I was, and I have to be honest, disappointed with FIFA. Everyone can understand that they're under a lot of pressure. The competition is now going, and of course they cannot have, fractions of the world coming and forcing different kit, or but this was reported 3 months before. It was not very controversial, and I think everyone could see that it was a bit important from a value perspective, given the debate. I think it was a bit accepted by Qatar. It was very flagged. Everyone knew it, and to then have the hard front on the game day, I found it was a lost opportunity to walk the talk for the universal right, and that they really played the West against the rest of the world card, which is efficient but dangerous, and not what we should do in football leadership, I think.
Does that make you really concerned about where Gianni Infantino has taken FIFA and how he's led?
I really don't want to point to just one person. I don't know him as a person, but he is our leader. So I have to make, of course, an exception. He is a leader, and I worry that the structures are so known that all leaders will end up in a corrupted way. So not money corrupted, but that we will the force and the power is too gathered, I find, on the president's hand, and the board is too big, and then it's not really a decision board, and I have, it's the lawyer in me that are very worried for the structure and governance, and one thing is to change the whole structure, which is impossible. Of course, everyone sees that, but I think it's small but very important things that we can change, and I think countries do agree. I do think every country agrees that it should be very transparent where money goes, for example, and what it's used for. Not maybe everyone will agree with their own country, but I do think they will agree with the other countries, and then so I find it very important that the leaders use the opportunity to speak, to really implement the reforms they were elected on. And then you have to, of course, choose your tone of voice and what you say very carefully, and not go into the West against East, those really dangerous, that these are just, moralism and hypocrisy. And maybe they find some of the media's going there. And I do think that was also right, on both sides. But it was not the discussions in the room. They were very fair. People wanted to play with the armband that was very integrated with Van Dijk, with all captains, and everyone from technical department as myself know it takes time to implement those things with players. So it's a careful work. You cannot go in and force it, and then to take it off again on game day, then you escalate a value war. And that was the first time I felt that it was about the rainbow. Before that I felt it was a power fight, and fair enough. FIFA do decide kit. So it was worrying, and I hope it has to be addressed, and it has to be, we have to work on this to heal it, because it was not good.
We saw you at the Congress in March, standing up, taking a stand on Qatari rights. What was the fallout from that? In the following months, did you feel targeted on social media? Anything uneasy happen to you? Did people try to sort of put you off being this voice speaking out on Qatar? And would you be willing to speak out in other countries, whether it's events going to China and concerns about the Uyghur persecution there?
I think everything happened after that. It was intense. It was on all outer points, all kinds of negative reactions and all kinds of positive reactions, and so I tried to focus on the positive reactions, which were just as much from Nepalese people, from African people, from South American people, than from Western countries. So my intention was not to be on the barricades for Western values. I myself, I'm a very liberal person. I like immigration. I work for it. I endorse it. I'm not a person that I really like to learn about other cultures, and I find it's fair enough to be conservative, but it's not me. But you have some universal rights that you have to found football upon, and that if you don't have teeth to bite with when they're stepped on, you will lose all moral authority in football leadership. So this is what I try to address, and I think it was too hard knocked down by FIFA. It was unnecessary, I think, or not FIFA, but the following speakers and the silence we met. I found that this could be an opportunity to meet. But I must say, throughout the 2022, I met a lot of Qataris that traveled there with the UEFA group, but also alone with my federation, and because Norway, good or bad, we have those record of human rights. It's part of our. Sometimes it's righteous and maybe stupid. Sometimes it's really efficient. We're small. We have that diplomatic. We raised that way. So to speak to these countries, smaller countries, has been very interesting, and I have very big respect of so many things of the Qatari culture, and I've learned so much also. And I've had very many conversations about the developments of LGBTQ rights, and it's not difficult to understand their dilemma with the Sharia, and it's very easy to understand. But it's still our job, I think, to push it in the direction that if you want to have mega events in football, you have to find a language to talk about this. You have to find solutions. Now we went into a World Cup without language even. Don't talk about it. It's very dangerous. It's very, you will not be arrested, but you cannot address it. No, okay, fine. How can I trust that? But I must say, the whole World Cup for me ended. I met Hassan Al Tawadi in Qatar. We had 1.5 talk on the game day, on the opening day, with his assistant. Of course, a very official talk, but still dialogue on very important matters. So to me, that is what it's all about. I know it's easy to ridiculize soft power, but to me, how else? How else are we gonna? We have to talk to each other, and I have big respect for that. It's a different culture, and they have to stick with their culture. But I do still think that those universal, the human rights policy of FIFA is good, and that we have that can hit all countries, and then we have to have teeth to bite with to have respect for those.
One of the other big FIFA things at the moment is this push for a 32-team Club World Cup. Do you feel that would be good for football or increase divisions, or do they seem too focused on a men's Club World Cup before even starting a women's
Yeah,
Club World Cup?
I do find it very crucial that the World Cup every second year is not a discussion. That you have the 4-year interval is very important. That I guess is the most important thing for UEFA, because everything else is a kill for Champions League, and you're getting back into the Super League discussion. Everything with clubs should be very anchored in the confederation. Generally, I find that the power of international football should be very focused on confederations, and I do think that we should focus on building the confederation, not just UEFA, or not. UEFA is very strong, the other confederation, and that should not be so centralized with FIFA. And then the initiative to have Club World Cup should come from confederations, because I do think FIFA, if they're too innovative, too into their own autonomy, it's such a fragile project, and it's such a to have it as a gathered unity. Uh, I find it's enough to have the World Cup, the laws of the game, and transfers. It's huge for the world. It's enough, and then build the African Confederation, build their own independence. So you asked me to answer short, and it's difficult from a person from Bergen. It's, but I don't have a short answer. I don't want to go in and kill the number of teams, but I'm worried that the tendency and the arrow is going in the direction of creating new competition to make the game global, and it's coming from a central body and not from organic discussion between confederations. And I find that a bit it can be threatening to the whole global project.
One that impacts you directly as well. UEFA announcing the changes for Euros men's qualifying, the Nations League. Is that a good thing for the Norwegian federation?
No, I think the Nations League has been in general a great success, and to have it now also on the women's side, I find it's a good idea. And you know how skeptical the countries were when the Nations League came in, and it still has been a very big success. So I think we have tried in Norway and Scandinavia to take a humble position. I do think it's the most important thing for us is to have respect for our very strong club autonomy. We cannot go into 2 international periods a year, or we have to have a structure where, especially on the women's side, where a structure where some of them semi-professionals, they have to be able to work in between the periods, and on the men's side as well. So no, I quite like the changes, but I have to take some reconsiderations. Maybe there are things that I haven't seen yet and my team haven't seen yet. But I have trust in FIFA's way of running and Marchetti's way of running the competition. He's been pretty bold, and they've done some good stuff on the women's side as well. So I have a fundamental respect that gives gives some trust into the work, and then I think they should have some room to act on as well.
Developments also on the UEFA front, that they're going to close this sort of loophole for their FFP, financial fair play calculations. We've seen Chelsea basically signing lots and lots of players on long contracts. I think Mudryk, the Ukrainian winger, 8.5 years. The idea is that I think we've talked before that they can extend or spread out the cost of the transfer over 8.5 years when it comes to FFP calculations. But now UEFA, I think a lot of clubs from other countries have said, look, we can't do this under our national laws. We have a 5-year maximum, so they're going to introduce a 5-year limit for amortization, as it's called. Do you think it's a sort of shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted a bit?
Well, certainly in Chelsea's case, because none of those will be targeted by this. I think there's 3 or 4 transfers they've got over 6 years. I can think of the chap they signed from Leicester way back in the summer, Fofana being one of those.
It's at least 4,
Yeah,
both
Cucurella from Brighton, I
Fofana.
think, as well, and then you've got Mudryk on 8.5. You at some point, do you put them on 20-year contracts? It's something that seems so obvious to do as well. Look, UEFA have said they're going to close this under FIFA's rules anyway. Contract lengths at the maximum are 5 years, unless there's this national law carve out, which I believe there is in England. But really, none of these players are going to be there for 8 years, are they? Or no, very few players remain on the same contract that they signed initially. If you're playing well, you're going to be rewarded with a new one, and if you're playing badly, you're likely to be moved on, right? So I can only think of one, and it's a great Chelsea example of a signing that didn't work for the club in this case. Do you remember Winston Bogarde, former Dutch national team player? He came from Barcelona, I think, and turns out he wasn't very good. And he was on this enormous contract, and they realised after 3 or 4 games that this chap, he really isn't any good. And Winston Bogarde quickly realised that I'm not going to get a contract like this anywhere I go. So for I think the last 3 years of his contract, his career pretty much, he was sat, arrived at training every day, exactly on time, left, and refused to move on this big fat contract, which is I guess the big risk of signing someone on an 8-year contract, but it's not going to happen. And in terms of UEFA, Martyn, I don't know, FFP and UEFA, sure. Let's see if they can close down loopholes. I found they've really struggled to tackle any of the big teams historically when it comes to FFP. Fine, yeah, they've said they're going to close this down. How do they police it? Clubs always find a way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Actually, this month is the start of the new calculations, isn't it, for UEFA? This new, you can only spend a percentage of your revenue on wages and transfers. So that's that's been the issue. I think it's why Chelsea have done this. I think it's 90% for 2023, and then goes down to 80, and then down to 70. Well, just to go back to Winston Bogarde, he wasn't that bad. He's played for Holland 20 times,
Well,
but
it turned out it wasn't very good when he arrived at Chelsea.
well,
he was.
maybe his face didn't fit. But anyway,
I think a few different managers. I mean, it was a remarkable situation.
yeah, he only played 19 times. Only 9 in 5 years. He only played 9 Premier League matches for Chelsea in 5 years. That is incredible.
It's a remarkable thing. Speaking of wages and salaries and things like that, and UEFA investigations, Juventus, Martyn. Um, this is a huge issue in Italy, massive scandal. The previous board has left, the one that was run by Andrea Agnelli, the Super League backer. This led to a number of officials being sanctioned. Pavel Nedved, sporting director at Juventus, great former Czech player, a risk for Tottenham as well. And their sports director, Tariq, he's been given a 13-month ban by Italian officials, and they want that extended worldwide. So Tottenham could be in a bit of trouble. And this is over, I guess, in the easiest way of explaining this is cooking the books. Juventus also is a listed company, and it involves this kind of capital gains from transfers, inflating the value of player sales and loans, which became really quite common in Italy, but was used to staggering effect by Juventus. And also, I think they covered up how much of a cut players were taking in their salaries during COVID. It was far less than they seem to be putting in their books. Big deal, this, Martyn.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've been docked 15 points, and it could get a lot worse because there's other things which is being investigated now, other financial alleged misdealings. This could also spread to other clubs. For example, if they're inflating the value of the transfers, they can't do that on their own.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a couple of, like, a transfer from Napoli, for example. So, if Napoli were sort of going along with this, could they be in trouble as well? This could be a really big thing for Italian football.
That's a good point. I remember a year ago when this actually, when the investigation first happened, the authorities did say there were a number of clubs, including Napoli, and there was almost 100 transfers across Syria. Juventus involved with a lot of them. So yeah, it could definitely spread. And the other thing that I found quite striking with the investigation is that the authorities were involved, and this is higher than football in turn, and the use of wiretaps were involved in this case, because we're talking about fraud, I guess. And again, it just reminds me, when the authorities get involved, when it's not football investigating itself, things seem to be taken seriously and things seem to happen. Because look, we're comparing. Juventus have got this 15-point penalty, which they're in the process of appealing, and all manner of other issues related to this. And this was done. I remember first writing about it about a year ago. So all within a year, all this is packaged up, and the penalties there. And then I look at what's happening, elsewhere. For example, in the Premier League, we've got a Manchester City investigation into alleged I guess financial doping, if you want, with links to sponsors in the country, which Man City deny or whatever. But 5 years now, Martyn, no sign of that ending, and then all manner of FIFA and UEFA investigations that are kind of opaque and kind of in ethics bodies never see the light of day sometimes.
Lisa, have you decided which post you're going to run for? Are you going to run for the women's position on the UEFA Exco, or are you going to run for in the general election?
I haven't really decided yet. My motivation is definitely to run for the open position because I'm president, and I think presidents are presidents regardless of gender. Everybody agrees with this, of course, and of course you should have mechanism to have diversity. Still, I find it a bit difficult to go in, to put the women up against the women, and we should. Time is here now, I think, to be at least 2 women in this board. I find Schäferin, a leader that can definitely be a leader that can, be a catalyst for this change, and. So maybe I'm saying too much because I haven't really decided. I get a lot of advice that I should run for the female position, that it's very difficult for the open position. But my motivation is very grounded in a feeling of responsibility, and that the case is important regardless if I come in or not. So I think I will land on the open position, and do not go against the other female candidates. But let's see.
Who are you getting this advice from? Because what you're saying to me is really interesting. You're kind of being pushed towards this female election. They're saying the other one is too challenging. One, I would say, why? And uh, as you said, you've been an FA president for several years. Why would you be shoehorned towards the women's specific role anyway? Like, who are these people advising you to do this, and why are they saying that?
No, to me that's a lot of people. I think it's from a tactical point of view that you should get to the table regardless of road in, because they know that I will be very prepared and engaged as a board. So people that know me would think that it would good to just come to the board and do not think of the way you get in, and I sort of agree with that. But it is a big question as to whether is it easier. That's the one thing, and then the other one is it. Are we not there now that we should at least have 2 women in? Not that it. I've never worked, on the barricades for women. It's always been the game. I've always come from the game. It's the biggest sport for women in the world as well. I've always worked with men and women's football. I was the first person in Norway to comment men's football Premier League, and now the first leader for the men's national team, and now the president. And I'm not. That's nothing special. But my point is that when people ask me why are you in the men's game, to me it's a natural question. I'm not. To me, it's really not how I feel it. And this is why it's important for me, I think, to go for the human positions, the open human position. And I like it's a female position because then other people than presidents can run, so that you have a sort of safety net to have enough candidates.
But it's huge prominence every week now for Norwegian football. The fact you've got Haaland at Manchester City, Odegaard at Arsenal, both going for the Premier League title. So they're talked about as key figures in the global game. I mean, talk about those players. I mean, interesting pathways. You've got Odegaard, who had this absolute growth from such a young age in football, such a challenging moment. And for Haaland, this huge presence of one of the greats. What's it like when you speak to them? Well, how are they individually as players?
Well, these are very normal boys to me. It's a good atmosphere in the national team. It's down to earth everything. It's very very down to earth and loose, if I can say it that way. And I find the coach Ståle Solbakken also very good at keeping the balance in the team. He's definitely the boss. But he has humor, and the whole group has good humor, which I really like and enjoy. Of course, Erling and Martyn are different people, but they're good friends. It's a friendly environment, the whole team. We've never had such a big star as Erling before, so for us it's a bit new, that we've had stars, of course, but now it's, it's gone to a new level of security and everything. So we all have to adapt, but within the camp, it's just normal boys, like on the women's team. So really pleasant, really motivating to go with the national teams. It's where I find my energy to go into different boardrooms for hours and hours. So these are energy fillers. And if you take Martyn, who's the captain of our team, he's really full of integrity, a player I really admire, a silent leader, and it's easy to use big words with big stars, and sometimes it's not really filled with content. But we followed him from teenage, and he's really what we call a full wood in Norway. You know what I mean? It's you knock on it and it's real, and Martyn is he's a leader and a player that, regardless actually of his performance now, I'm really proud to have him as a captain in the national team.
Lisa, maybe it will change in the future. Hopefully it will. But you're kind of in this unique position. There are other female FA heads, probably just a handful, I think 3 at most. But you, I think Rob's question as well, you've got this insight that no one else probably has, because you're dealing with now multi-millionaire male footballers. You've just mentioned one of the most famous men in the world, Erling Haaland, in your men's national team, and you also have a women's national team, and you guys have been kind of pioneers as well in terms of equality of national teams. But the women, in terms of their day-to-day living, it's completely different to the men who arrive from their millionaire contracts. Can you describe that scenario a little bit?
Yeah. I find it very interesting, and this is also why I feel confident with my candidacy in UEFA. Not that I wake up every day and feel I am strong. I feel very weak at very many times, and it's a difficult environment. I know that people find me outspoken and everything, and that I have to really show my colleagues in Europe that I'm a bridge builder. I'm a judge. I'm coming from a balancing position, but it's just to have that world where you balance these two worlds, and done for years. I find it very interesting. It's how it is. It's not something I go in and fight, or it's not the boys' mistake, or they have not done anything wrong to make the world like this. And it's very important for us to win with our men's national team, and revenues, they're not the enemy. That we have revenues on the men's side is not the enemy. So throughout the years, the technical department in Norway, and I find probably every technical department where men's and women's football are integrated, you will have this a bit complex work where you have to compare a bit, because you have to compare. You cannot treat a 13-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl totally different. It's a matter of human rights. It's a matter of equality. Your daughter and son, they will notice. You have to have recognition, but we know it's billions on the one side, and the other side is at best you can live from it, maybe. So it's a complex work where you have to compare a bit to be political and to have redistribution, but also to be very aware that we're not an equality department. We're not politicians. We're not taking from the men's side just to lift. We have to take what they can give without lose competition force, and we have to take enough so the women's side can increase revenues themselves, because real equality is when the women's side generates revenues themselves and ourselves. So this is really motivating to me, and what I see in the future is that the women's side will generate revenues, and we should just be careful to not go into that unfettered capitalism and the destructive capitalism that has happened on the men's side. But I do think it will be a very interesting time for women's football the next 10 years.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us here on Sport Unlocked. Lise Klaveness, who's running for election for the UEFA Council, president of the Norwegian Football Federation. In a word, what's the one thing you change in football if you are elected to the UEFA Executive Committee?
Build bridges on the very, very difficult cases, and have real transparency in decision making.
Thank you very much for all your insights today.